The People versus David Anthony Burke, a star musician charged with ending the life of 14-year-old Celeste Hernandez Rivas. What's going to be inside the defense playbook? How do you defend someone like David, who, don't forget, is presumed innocent? Well, welcome to the Margaret McLean Show. I'm a former prosecutor, and on this channel, I translate what's really happening in the system, what matters, what doesn't, and what's coming next. So be sure to subscribe and press the like button and the notifications button so you don't miss anything. So I'm very lucky. In this episode, we are joined by a prominent Los Angeles criminal defense attorney, Silva Megerditchian, host of the Law Lounge with Silva, and I am a subscriber to the channel. I actually love it. Again, it's called the Law Lounge with Silva. It's very informative. Definitely subscribe to her channel, and welcome to the show, Silva.
Thank you, Margaret, so much for having me. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you. And we were talking prior to the show.
Yeah.
The two of us were on Court TV at the same time,
Yes.
breaking down the Karen Reed case. So here we go again, former prosecutor, defense attorney. So this should be a great case. So I can't wait to break this one down with you. First, though, I'm going to recap about the case for those of you who are not familiar with it. So last September, the decomposing, dismembered body of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez was discovered inside two cadaver bags stuffed in the front trunk, the frunk of a Tesla, registered to rising celebrity music star David, which is D4vd, David Anthony Burke. He's been arrested on charges of M with special circumstances where he qualifies for the death penalty. The charges include killing a witness, lying in wait, a continuous essay of a child under the age of 14, dismemberment and concealment of Celeste Rivas's body. Now, David is represented by defense attorney Blair Burke, a celebrity criminal defense lawyer. He's entered a not guilty plea, and his defense team claims he's completely innocent. His family is also standing by him. The preliminary hearing, where the prosecution is going to be laying out some of the evidence supporting these charges, has just been rescheduled to June 29th. And on that day, the judge will decide if there's probable cause for the charges. So actually, why don't we start with that? Yeah. Why do you think there was a delay, Silva?
You know, it's funny. Usually in a case of this magnitude, a defense attorney wants to make sure that they have all of their information, and we call it discovery. Discovery is everything related to the case. It's not only the arrest report, it includes recordings, videos, cell phone data, everything you could imagine, DNA evidence. All of that discovery takes time to turn over to the defense attorneys. So it is virtually impossible when you go to your first court date in Department 30, and I'm there all the time in the criminal courts building in downtown LA. A prosecutor gives you, absolutely, they give you a file, and the file maybe, if you're lucky, has about 30 pages in it. It has the charges and maybe the arrest report. Sometimes we don't even get the arrest report until a little bit later. And so what happens is Blair Burke did a very risky and strategic move. Blair is an amazing Los Angeles-based criminal defense attorney. She's been in the business a long time. She's represented huge celebrities. But she did play a little bit of a game of chicken with the prosecutor. And Ms. Silverman also in the DA's office, she is, I mean, this is really a battle of the titans. You have an amazingly brilliant DA and an amazingly brilliant, experienced defense attorney. And Blair Burke said, look, we know that you don't have all your evidence, so we're going to push this to prelim because we don't think that you have enough probable cause to keep him in. That's one hypothetical, Margaret. But the other is maybe David told Blair Burke, look, I want to exercise my right to a speedy preliminary hearing, and I want it now. Those are the two distinct possibilities. But I think in this latest court date, I think what happened was, honestly, that Blair Burke kind of had to concede that she could not ethically, as with due diligence, do a prelim when there's 40 terabytes of evidence, only have 10. So
And explain what 40 terabytes of evidence means.
it's way too much. I mean,
Right.
it is so much electronic evidence to go through. It's going to be videos, it's going to be cell phone evidence. There's likely going to be DNA in there, investigative reports. It is so much evidence for this case. It would be an impossibility for one person to get through it within a 30-day period. Mind you, she is a sought after defense attorney. David is not her only case. So she and her team, they're also fighting other cases that have paid for her. So obviously she needs time. And Margaret, defense attorneys need experts. The DA's office has endless amounts of money. We, to properly defend our clients, need our investigators to delve into the evidence. That means the investigators, the experts, need time to go through that evidence to fight the evidence. So to speed up a case that possibly could get a death penalty sentence,
Mm.
it was a very high risk move. And she literally pulled the reins, and Blair Burke needed to do that.
Yeah. And I think it's smart to add time if you're a defense attorney, because why rush it at this point, right?
You know, it's always a battle in our minds. And the cases that we speed, there's a reason for it. If I know for certain prosecutors can't produce a witness or they can't produce a video, it is in our benefit to push it, because if they can't produce it, we can actually get a dismissal if they can't prove that there's probable cause for the arrest. But if you're dealing with a case of this magnitude, where there's been 3 grand juries, there have been mountains of evidence, you have to take it slowly but surely, because as a defense attorney, it's our reputations, our bar cards, everything rides on our representation. You can't speed it up, make a mistake. And, I always say it's the detriment to our career if we speed something along without getting the full story of what's happening. It's just
Right.
not right.
How big of a team would you need to go through 40 terabytes of evidence?
Oh my gosh, Margaret, a lot. Look,
Yeah.
you want a paralegal, you want a seasoned investigator or 2 or 3. You want, if you have co-counsel on the case or attorneys that you are mentoring, you want them. You want them to flag the necessary evidence. Margaret, years ago, I had defended a murder client, a murder suspect. He was being accused of murder. He was under the age of 18. He was facing adult state prison. Hidden within a mountain load of evidence. I actually went through it because I knew the story that the prosecutors were trying to tell did not make sense. We found an actual eyewitness buried in the evidence who stated, and I quote, "I never saw my client's first name ever having a weapon in his hand. In fact, he never had a weapon in his hand." That
Wow.
cleared my client. But if I was lazy or did not go through that evidence, I could have never cleared him. And we ended up keeping the case in juvie. It saved his
Wow.
life.
Oh,
Exactly.
yeah.
So it's like you have to go through, and you never know where there's a nugget. There was another example. One of my closest friends, his client was arrested in Beverly Hills for a DUI. A prosecutor stopped reviewing the body cam of the police officer. In one of the later, they didn't realize the body cam was still on. The officer said horrific anti-Semitic things about the client.
Ah,
And that
jeez.
alone got the case a much better deal. So it's incumbent,
Mhm.
it's so important that we go through it, and you need a team. We
Oh,
only
yeah.
have 2 eyes, 2 ears. We get exhausted, we get migraines as attorneys. You need a team. And it's really, she has her work cut out for her, and so
Oh
does her
my God.
team.
And, out of curiosity, people have been asking me, and I really don't know the answer here, but I mean, what's a ballpark retainer for for a case like this?
You know why you don't know, Margaret? Because it's impossible to tell. And, attorneys will base their retainers on the amount of hours that they'll need to fight the case and also their prominence. You cannot take every single case. It's impossible. I always say to my clients, I have a cutoff, because for me to represent a client properly, I need time. And I don't have that time if I have 100 clients a month retaining me. It's just not going to work.
No.
So you pick and choose. And when I was a public defender, I started my career as a Los Angeles-based public defender. We had
Wow.
so many clients that you could not, I tried to be the best I could, and I loved my clients as a public defender, but you really were overwhelmed because
Yeah.
there were too many cases, too many clients, and you were always run ragged. I had alopecia areata, stress-related hair
Oh,
loss
yeah. Yep.
illness because I was so spread thin. And so I promised myself when I went private, I would not take every case. But because of that, our fees can be really high, can be reasonable, or if we're desperate for cases, much lower. My assumption is this has to be a seven-figure case. It has to be. There's just too much. And if it's a death penalty case, this will be Blair Burke's #1 case on her list to defend because she has too much writing on it.
Oh, and the publicity alone. I mean, people can't get enough of this case. I mean, it's the gruesome details. It's what they put out in that the memo for the preliminary hearing. It's just people just can't get enough. And so let's talk about the death penalty in California. I know voters voted it in. What, in 2016 was it? And
Yes.
but we haven't seen a death penalty case. There's been a moratorium. So how does that apply here, do you think?
Well, it's okay. It's interesting to me. And, I know your listeners are going to, it's a very polarizing argument, right, about the death penalty. Some people are absolutely for it. Some people are absolutely against it. I always say, the death penalty should be used in extreme circumstances. And Nathan Hochman, when he first became the head district attorney of LA, he said, look, I am not like George Gascon, the previous DA. I actually am open to using the death penalty, but only in extreme cases. And he had made note that he wanted multiple victims and, extreme violence. I would be very surprised if he has the death penalty for a case where it's a solo murder. However, I feel like the signs have been pointing to it. He's doing a lot of press conferences. He's really focused on the draconian quality of this case, meaning just how truly evil it was. When David met Celeste, let's remember she was 11.
Yeah.
Sexual abuse, dismemberment, the hideousness, even lying in wait, waiting for her to come to his home. He keeps on talking about how hideous it is. And I think and Nathan Hochman has had a lot of publicity from this. The DA's office, they want a big win. And if they go for a death penalty case, I can see it, but I would hope not. I think really the death penalty should be used, honestly, in extreme cases where, you have multiple victims. I just think that, as a defense attorney, I know your audience might say, Silva, come on, but I do defend people who do have special circumstance cases. And it would be very difficult if Nathan Hochman started doing death penalty for a multitude of cases where there are solo victims. It's just hard.
Yeah. And he's young too.
Yes. And obviously troubled. And I've always told people the reason why I became a criminal defense attorney, it's not that I want people to get off. That's not what we do. I want to fight for innocent people. And I want to fight for people who've maybe had horrific childhoods where society ignored them. They weren't seen, they weren't heard. And we can, by figuring out the tools of why it happened, we can prevent future conduct. And that is what I strive for. If we fix the tree's roots, we're going to have a healthy tree. If we have rotted roots, we're going to have a rotten tree. Let's find out why and fix so that more people aren't victims. So,
yeah. And, I think there's it's hypothetically, you get a case like this, and I know you've had all sorts of cases going back with your experience, including, defending sex crime cases.
Yes.
So, and people keep forgetting. I hate how cases are tried in the media, by the way. And here I am on YouTube talking about it, but
both of us,
yeah, I know. But like the Karen Reed case, that was certainly tried in the media.
Yeah.
and others. So I guess my question to you would be how, and a lot of people ask, so when you have a defendant like this who's been just slammed in the media, everybody already thinks he's guilty. What would your strategy be? What kind of angles would you look at? For example, is there a mental health angle, or could there possibly be a setup? And how would you go about that?
You would have to explore every angle, Margaret, in such a
Yeah.
high-profile case. It's amazing. Blair is an attorney who's known as being very calm, cool, and collected, and she seldom, if ever, makes comments to the media. She's very old school. She believes in a strong, confident, and quiet defense. Things have changed a lot where, as defense attorneys, using the media, Karen Reed is the biggest example of this. You can really get a public that truly believes that your client is innocent, and it can affect the jury pool. And Karen Reed used this brilliantly in every capacity in ways that we had never seen.
Yeah.
In this
Alan
case,
Jackson, I think, was the one behind that, really.
I want to say and I know and respect Alan very much, but I do
Yes.
think that Karen had a huge effect because we can't do anything without our clients' permissions. Honestly, even media statements, I make sure that my client knows exactly what I'm going to say, when I'm going to say it, and if the client signs off on it, and I want a physical signature that they sign off on it. I think that Karen Reed really understood the power of the bloggers, the podcasts, the media, and really kind of forced Alan Jackson's hand to say, look, I know what I'm doing here. Trust me. I think when it comes to media savvy, I got to give it to Karen Reed.
Yeah.
I do think it came from her. But I will tell you, in Blair's and her team, I think the basis of this defense is leave no stone unturned. You have a hungry prosecutor. You have the head of the DA's office, Nathan Hochman. They have spent endless time, money, and energy on this case in ways we haven't seen before. There are cracks in their case. They're
Yeah.
minor, but they can be exploited. The fact that the medical examiner couldn't come up with a reason for Celeste, what actually killed this beautiful little girl, they couldn't come up with a reason. That's something as defense attorneys we can grab a hold of. But there's another issue that's deeper, Margaret, too. Would this young man be so arrogant and so foolish as to order a bunch of stuff on Amazon.com in order to kill this girl in a wide open way? It's kind of crazy to me, if you think about it, why he would be so deliberate and obvious. He did use an alternate name, but it was delivered to his home. His car is registered to him, the Tesla where the dismembered body was found. So that could be something that she also, could it be someone on his team who was getting paid by David and possibly was like, oh my God, this girl is going to exploit this kid. We need to kill her. And maybe convince David to be a part of it, or David watch. There's a lot of intricacies that we can really dig into. And I'll tell you, Margaret, too, I've had cases where I was retained and I told the client, I don't see a way out of this, but give me time. Let me get my team on it. And then all of a sudden, my investigator will say, Silva, you won't believe this. And my case blows wide open in ways that I'm like, I couldn't. If you paid me $1 million, I wouldn't have seen this from day one. So let's see how it develops. We are in such the infantile stage of this. But I will tell you, between this young man's darkness with his lyrics,
the lyrics,
there were signs, right, that there's something deeper here. They have a huge hill to overcome. But do I think it's insurmountable at this point? Too early to tell. I wouldn't bet against Blair Burke on a case.
Yeah, and I also think a crack in the case, too, is I'm confused as to if they found, well, they obviously found Celeste's dismembered body in his Tesla back in September, yet he wasn't arrested until, what was it, not that long ago, April, right?
Yes.
So why is that? I'd be questioning that as a defense attorney, right? Why did they leave him on the street?
And why did they need so many grand juries? And why did the medical examiner keep the results sealed and then undetermined? There are questions. Now, look, it is obvious these guys, 40 terabytes, again, it's an amazingly ridiculous amount of information that these guys have had. And it obviously takes months to get it. But that is a very crazy gap in this case. And
Yeah.
again, something that Blair Burke will need to investigate and figure out and see if the police work especially can be manipulated. We know,
Mhm.
and we saw this in Karen Reed, jurors do not respect, like, or believe sloppy detective work. And if Blair can really put her magnifying glass on sloppy work, we have something here. And I do think prosecutors actually were forced to file this case because police didn't want to wait anymore. They rushed this case to filing. So we don't know why. That's another thing that I think the team needs to really follow up on.
Yeah, no, I think you've got a good point. And it's interesting. I look at it opposite, that they didn't rush because it took so long to make an arrest.
It's true though. I think the
Huh.
cops really pushed it after so many months because
Yeah.
they even realized it was a bad look. I think the DA's office wanted a little bit more time to solidify their case. But again, what has come out is so insanely egregious
Mm-hmm.
that right now they're winning the media war. To think at this point, the jury pool that's out there, we have prospective jurors right now who are following every move of this case.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that's going to affect an actual jury being impaneled in this case.
And in your opinion, I know it's early on and you don't
Yeah.
know anything yet from the defense side, what type of juror would you want for this case?
Wow. Here's the thing. If there's a lot of scientific evidence, I don't want scientific minds on the jury. Accountants, very black and
Mhm.
white people, right? And people that are quick to make determinations, tax agents, anyone who's quick to decide. We don't want that. We want the philosopher, the psychologist. We want people that are like, there's no black and white, there's a lot of gray. Those gray people, they will tear down
Mhm.
the evidence and really look at it. The
Yeah.
ones, the scientific minded people will really look at the DNA evidence and say, done,
Yeah.
done. There's pieces of that plastic pool that was ordered by, David, delivered to the house, found on her body, the missing,
Allegedly.
allegedly, the
Yeah.
missing tattoo on the finger, allegedly, that was missing on her body. All of those things, you want someone that really will dig through it. And I always say, I
Mhm.
want a juror who really listens to me and looks like they're thinking. You don't want this, right? You want someone who's really open
No.
to the evidence.
Right. And so, when you're picking a jury like this, now, would you use jury consultants? What do you think about
Absolutely.
them? Okay.
100%. I think anybody that can help us pinpoint a person who would believe in the defense case is imperative. And people might say, "Oh, you're such a dirty defense attorney, Silva." No,
No, that's not true. People
it's
need
not.
defense attorneys.
Amen. And not only that, oh, I'm sorry, not only that, but the as defense attorneys, it's really hard for us because people will automatically assume our client's guilt as soon as they walk into that courtroom and see them
Mhm.
next to us. Margaret, I'll never forget, I had a young African American client when I was a public defender. And I was really young, I was just starting out in the office, and the judge asked, "Can you be a fair juror?" And she looked square at my client and said, "Your Honor, he is a young black man sitting next to defense counsel. It would be very hard for me to believe he didn't do it."
Wow.
And my client broke down in tears.
Oh.
And we ended up actually settling the case. The prosecutor felt that her evidence wasn't strong enough and really had a lot of sympathy for what was going on. But you would be surprised how many jurors walk into that room and go, that person is sitting next to defense counsel, that person did it. And so
Mhm.
we, as defense attorneys, always have to fight that prejudicial feeling.
Oh,
We
yeah.
are innocent until proven guilty
Yeah.
because of the evidence, and keep an open mind. That is the key to every defense.
Oh, I agree. And I also think it's difficult here when you have a sex crime. So
Yeah.
that's part of it. And So back when I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted some of those cases, and some involving children, so it was very hard.
Yes.
But as a prosecutor, I had an advantage. I mean, people were just immediately, it was hard for them to get over the fact that it was a crime against a child. So fast forward, I was a juror in a case
Wow.
where there was a child sexual, I think it was a sexual assault of a child, and I was number 80. Okay.
Wow.
And they were impaneling a jury. So I sat there all day. And then finally they got to my number, and everybody was tired, the attorneys, and they only had picked one juror out of 80 people. So it was almost, almost 5 o'clock. And the judge said, "Can you be fair and impartial?" Because they knew I was a former prosecutor. And I said, "Yes, because I prosecuted these cases, but I also screened cases in and screened them out. So I know there were false claims as well."
Yes. Yes.
So, and it's very, people would be surprised at how many false claims there are. So I said, "Yes, I can be fair and impartial." And the judge did not dismiss me for cause, but made the defense. So the defense got rid of me with a peremptory challenge. But I think they should have kept me on the jury because but still, I think that just the fact that they went through 80 people shows how difficult it is for people to deal with these types of crimes. So
And
emotional. They have children.
and honestly, what we fight all the time is, why would a child lie? They are so young, they're so impressionable, but do they have the capacity to come up with such outrageous lies? Now, I've had cases, right, where, and you've seen them where you haven't prosecuted them,
Yeah.
where there are, in divorce situations and one parent has custody and they'll try to exaggerate or lie about a circumstance. We see that. But in a lot of our cases, as soon as there's molestation or anybody under the age of 18, our case becomes even more difficult. And the
Ah,
egregiousness of this one, Margaret, that
oh
she
my
was
gosh.
11. I
I
mean,
know.
it's just, and her parents tried. They took away her cell phone, and David provided allegedly another cell phone to her.
Yeah. For
He really,
$1,000. Yeah.
Amen. He really tried to groom this little girl in every capacity and then to slaughter her allegedly. It's going to really stick out in a juror's mind as not only egregious, but out of the ordinary when it comes to motive or reason, right? A shallow motive. She's going to ruin my career. Come on, dude. Come on. Allegedly.
Allegedly, I know. So I think it's quite a hurdle for the defense, and that's why,
Yeah.
it's easy to get up there and here on the channel and talk about all the evidence that they have. And I done shows on this case and went through the evidence, and in the emotion. But I think the harder issue is, how on earth do you defend a case like this? I think, with the sex crime involved, and I think they're going to have a really good private investigator.
Absolutely. And a DNA analyst. You're going to
Yep.
want, because they're going to bring in a lot of DNA. You need to counter that DNA. And there's a lot of defenses towards DNA with our expert. And then the Celebrite expert, the cell phone data that comes out, we have our own cell phone experts. I've had experts tear apart the prosecutor's cell case, but they need all of that. It's going to be incredibly expensive. We know this young man is worth quite a bit of money. He will be paying for all of those experts, for continuous representation. And honestly, Margaret, we've seen cases that start like this, and then all of a sudden they get a public defender because they've wiped out their whole savings defending themselves.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see who ends up representing David towards the end of the case when it's about to go to jury trial.
Yeah, that's true. And, in this case, this is so unusual as well, because he had such a fast rise to fame, with Fortnite. And I don't know if you're familiar with the gaming world. My son told me a little bit about it, like the whole concept of the montage. So basically, the montage is he created romantic homicide in his sister's closet with his cell
Yeah.
phone, which to me is really creative and quite amazing.
Yeah.
And then everybody else wanted it, and boom, 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 boom. All of a sudden, he's got a record deal. He's on a world tour. It just blows my mind that everything can be thrown away like this. But he made a lot of money. So just going back to that Fortnite, which is owned by Epic Games, to give you an idea. I'm losing my mind here. The guy that's engaged to Taylor Swift. What's his name?
Oh,
Kelsey.
Kelsey, yeah.
Yeah.
Travis Kelsey.
Yes. So I think he also, and people out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he also is being paid by Epic Games and the whole montage thing and blah, blah, blah. But he makes just on that $20 million a year. So
It is, but Margaret, this is also
crazy.
why criminal law always fascinated me, even as a child. You have a guy who's self-made, obviously brilliant, everything in his fingertips, and he let it go for what? He was
I
afraid
know.
his career was going to go downhill because of a girl's allegations. He was obviously incredibly and insanely resourceful that he created his persona and brilliance from his own sister's closet.
Yeah.
It is, but we also see this with husbands who kill their wives or wives who kill their husbands. And you ask, guys, was it so difficult to just get a divorce? Did you have to kill them? It's just, that is, I think, the fascinating aspect of what we do, and why we have so many people who love true crime. What makes someone throw away their whole lives for an end game that's lit? Do they really think they're going to get away with it? Did David really think allegedly hiding a body in his Tesla, registered to him, having these things, chainsaws delivered to his home, baiting her to come to his house? Did he really think, if in fact these allegations are true, that he would feasibly get away with it? The same guy that created ingenious music by himself and promoted himself. It's the same brain. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And to the point where it's almost too good to be true for the prosecution. That's where I think reasonable doubt, because who in their right mind would put a dismembered body in a Tesla, in your own Tesla, not far from the rental apartment, and leave it there, and then go off on tour and leave it there for months and months and months? We know he ordered a burn cage. It looked like at one point, well, allegedly, but it looks like at one point maybe he was thinking of getting rid of the remains with the burn cage. But I'm thinking there's some sort of mental health issue going on there, maybe. Or it's a setup. I mean,
Margaret,
that's a possibility. I don't know.
Anything is possible. Let's go back to the lyrics, right?
Yes, let's talk about that.
This young man, and just talking about the interplay between mental health and his lyrics. Romantic homicide. In the back of my mind, I killed you and didn't even regret it. I have it in my cheat notes in front of me.
Good, because I meant to put it up earlier.
I've had this song was done before Celeste's murder, but at the same time, it gives us an insight into his mind. In 2025, he actually released a music video of a bloodied body that he had pushed behind a car. This kind of thought process can be used against him if the judge finds it relevant and probative and not prejudicial, right? But it shows an insight. Is this someone who was fascinated with death, fascinated with murder, and propelled him to do the unthinkable? Could it be that he was so within this fantasy world that he thought he could get away with it? Or is it that people thought, hey, we can set him up to take the fall for this killing because look how dark he is, and we can have all the fingers pointing at him because he is this dark figure? And mental health. It always, Margaret, in every case that we do, we always go through mental health analysis, whether they're guilty or not guilty, because they're in custody, suicidal ideation through the roof. And also, you just want to see at the time this happened, was there a mental health crisis? If we do think that our client could have done it.
Yeah, because I know that, I mean, again, we don't know, we haven't seen what the defense has, but
Yeah.
sometimes when people are in severe psychosis, they can commit, terrible, heinous acts
Yeah.
and then compartmentalize and not remember them too.
We
So,
block absolutely, we block out so much. We block out trauma. We
mhm.
block out everything that's based, on PTSD symptoms as well. It will be interesting as we get to know. Look, we saw this with Nick Reiner too. You
Yes.
know, like there is so much mental health in
Yeah.
that case alone. But the question isn't that he is sick now. It's at the time of the alleged murders. Was he in the throes of that mental health? Was there a substantial interaction between the mental health and what happened? That's what has to be proven in order to have that mental health defense. And is it organic or is it drug produced? So there's a lot
Hmm.
of intricate aspects that, as defense attorneys, in every case where there's any kind of heinousness that we go through, and honestly, if we even have a 1% shot, Margaret, of having our clients out, it is incumbent upon us as well to get them proper mental health treatment to prevent future victims. I just wish this
Yeah.
country had better mental health
So do
treatment.
I. So do I. And, what's going on now, too, is there's a lot of marijuana induced psychosis going on. So, in fact, one of my friends, I went to lunch today with some of my girlfriends, and she has a son with severe mental health issues. And so when her son was in the hospital, one of the mental health hospitals around here, his entire ward was with people, mostly college age kids who got psychosis, marijuana induced psychosis. So it's very interesting as to what they're putting in the weed these days. I know it's legal in your state and in my state, but it seems to be stronger and stronger. And my question here would be, let's go back to Nick Reiner. Let's
Yeah.
say he wasn't in a drug-induced psychosis, out of his mind, when he allegedly killed his parents. What, as a defense attorney, what would you argue? Would you be able to get him off? Is that, how hard is it to do that?
It's very difficult. Look, not guilty because for reason of insanity is incredibly a difficult
Hmm.
high bar. But also, it's so interesting you say that, Margaret, because I have seen it as someone who 50% of my clients are under the age of 18. And
Hmm.
we have seen incredible incidents of marijuana induced psychosis. It's a
Yeah.
developing brain. If the child has ADHD or any type, of any kind of brain development that's still happening. You bring marijuana into the picture and you're seeing things that we've never seen before. As
Yeah.
people say, it's not the 1960s joints. It's not even
No.
the 1980s joints. This is
Right.
something we've never seen.
Yeah.
So when it comes to clients that are in the throes of drug-induced psychosis, we have a little bit of a more difficult time. It's a little bit easier when it's organic psychosis, meaning the person was born or developed schizophrenia
Hmm.
or a disorder that we know wasn't treated properly and can be treated properly with proper mental health. And in the Nick Reiner situation,
Mm.
it can be used, I think, for mitigation, but I don't think it can be used to get him off the case. I think this is so abhorrent. And let's not forget, his family essentially has turned their backs on him, allegedly. Nick Reiner is really, that's why he's with the public defender's office
Hmm.
now. There is not money for representation when it comes to private. He is being represented by an amazing public defender,
I'm
but
not
he doesn't,
surprised. Yeah.
yes, but not the money to defend him. So that's an interesting aspect that shows the family believes that this was something possibly under Nick's control, allegedly. But it will be interesting to see how that develops. But I don't think that he's going to walk away. And I don't see a not guilty for reasons of insanity, not in a
Okay.
case where there's a multitude of years of voluntary drug use within and out of rehab. I
Hmm.
do not see an NGI in his future. But I could be
Well,
wrong.
well, the other thing too, so sometimes you can be born with, schizophrenia, or you can develop, usually it's developed later on,
Yes.
say when you're around 18 to in your 20s. But if you had schizophrenia or bipolar and you've had treatment, and then you go out and you smoke marijuana, that can
Yeah.
get you right back to these psychosis. And once you've had psychosis, it can get worse and worse and worse every time you've had an episode. So, um, it'll be interesting. And I think what you say about Nick Reiner is very, as far as maybe mitigation is the best they can hope for in that case.
Absolutely. And we do see the self-medicating. I think
Mm-hmm.
very difficult for anybody these days to say they don't have a family member with mental health
Right.
issues.
Right.
And you add to that self-medicating of non-prescribed, whether illegal drugs or even legal drugs that aren't
Mm-hmm.
properly given, it makes the illness even more exacerbated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are cases that we can use this for mental health diversion, but when cases are so violent and
Yeah.
so egregious, we don't have that. And the statute makes that clear that we don't have that defense when it's such a horrific crime as,
Mm.
a double homicide. I mean, but I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think in that case, I absolutely do not think Nathan Hochman will go for the death penalty for Nick Reiner, especially with the history that we know. The Reiners were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on dual diagnosis centers for their son. And it also
Mm-hmm.
seemed that he was wrongly prescribed medication that exacerbated the mental health issue. That's why it's incumbent upon us to learn why these things happen and try to help it rather than be shocked with the crime once it happens. We need that structure so these people have somewhere to go. I have a multimillionaire client, Margaret, whose brother is suffering with advanced schizophrenia, and she
Mm.
can't get him help.
I
And
know.
you
Yeah,
can't help the erratic behavior. All you can do is try to give them resources, and then these
yeah,
centers will reject them.
I
They're
know.
too far gone. We can't help them. But that's what the center should do.
I know,
So,
because the public at large is in danger if somebody's released. If, for example, yes, just yesterday, did you hear about the shooting on Memorial Drive in Boston, Cambridge?
yes.
Yeah. So what happened, for those of you that may not know, people were just driving around the beautiful Charles River up and down, and all of a sudden, this guy with a criminal record who actually was only served 6 years for attempted M of police officers. So he's been in and out of the system for 20 years, but I also think he had an underlying mental health issue. So he
Yes.
gets out with an assault rifle and starts shooting at cars. Thank God nobody was killed, but two people are critically injured and they're in the hospital. So they did subdue him, but that's what we're dealing with. So sad.
It is, but I will tell you, the majority of these solo shooters or solo murderers or anybody that commits, at least the people that I have represented, it's never been an incident where it's a normal person who kills someone. It has been majority either a mental health issue,
Mhm.
severe trauma in childhood, a foster care system, no parents, or the parents were in state prison or tragically, dead. There's so many traumas. Imagine a world where we can treat those traumas right when the child is young and give them consistent and constant therapy and intervention. Would we have the explosion of crime that we're all dealing with?
Mhm.
That's, I think, what makes me love what I do. If
Yeah.
just to help families deal with their children and give them
Mhm.
the resources.
That's why they call us counselors,
And now,
right?
and Margaret, now it's like we're not only attorneys.
Yeah.
We have become therapists. We have
Yeah.
become people who are diagnosing issues, recommending doctors. I would say 80% of my caseload right now, I have doctors that are appointed, therapists, and social workers, because I want to prevent future activity, not just past activity, but can we change the course of someone's life? And I've
Mhm.
seen a lot of success stories, but we
Oh,
have to put
good.
the effort and money into it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And services, whether they're really good drug rehab services or mental health services. And I think all the states can do better. I know Massachusetts can do better.
Oh, I don't think there's a state right now that does it really beautifully. I think if they did, there would be a zero crime rate. And I know people, look, crime is always going to happen. There's always going to be an economic disparity. I get that. But imagine if people did feel truly heard and seen. It would just, I know I sound like a Disney character, Margaret, but I just think
No.
the best way to prevent crime is to really help those people who have experienced a pain that a lot of us can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to strive towards.
No, I completely agree with that. And one thing I wanted to ask you too, and we sort of touched on it, but I want to get it back, is the whole lyrics thing. You mentioned one of your, again, I'm going to tell everybody, you guys, if you like the law, you like true crime, you will learn something on Silva's channel, The Law Lounge with Silva. That's it, The Law Lounge with Silva, right?
Yes. Thank you. Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So I strongly recommend it. I've learned stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to have her on. But I liked the show you did for the Law Lounge, and I believe you were on Fox News as well, talking about California just passing a new law as far as the lyrics go. Tell us about that.
In 2022, there was a law that passed that really protected artistic expression. And the reason why was there was kind of this path that courts were really using rap lyrics against defendants in a way that just didn't seem ethical nor fair. And so it is a very high bar to introduce artistic expression in courtrooms, but it's not impossible. It's a weighing, right? And if the DA can argue, if the prosecutor can argue that it is incredibly similar between the lyrics and the event, that it is probative, that it is so probative that the prejudicial effect is nullified. And what do we mean by prejudicial effect? Jurors take this evidence very seriously. And it is so prejudicial, like, in other words, romantic homicide, right? To say, I killed her and I didn't even think about it. Even though that happened before, it sticks in the minds of the jurors. It's incredibly prejudicial. A music video with a body being dragged in a car after a murder is incredibly prejudicial. And in a lot of jurors' minds, they're like, that's it, this kid did it. Does the probative value, is it more important than the prejudicial effect on the jury? The judge will decide that outside of the presence of the jury to see if the lyrics or the imagery can come through. Now, the statute makes it difficult, but not impossible. And what's interesting about David's case is I do think it's incredibly prejudicial because of how dark those lyrics are. But I do think prosecutors have a strong argument. And LAPD said that although LAPD has no power over the court case, they actually say that they want these lyrics in evidence. So it'll be interesting to see that develop.
Like they don't have enough evidence already.
I mean,
we don't know.
We don't know, but 40 terabytes, Margaret, is going to be, I mean, an immense, what we've already seen is overwhelming. And again, a lot of people believe insurmountable, but again, I want to see where the defense will take this.
Yeah. And I think it'll be very interesting. Some of the motions in cases like this. Oh, by the way, will there be cameras in the courtroom for this, do you think?
It all depends on the judge and what the attorneys want. Blair she's not a media hound. So I know that one of her trials was televised, one of her LA trials. I don't know if this one will be. It's such a heinous crime. I'm actually not sure. It really will be up to the judge and the defense attorney, and whether they think that and also the client. They will all have a say on whether cameras should be allowed in the courtroom. And if the judge says it should be, they have the right to object as well. So we don't know at this point whether the trial will be televised, but we will know at some point. And I do think it's going to take a lot of time before this goes to trial.
Yeah. But I think just like in the Karen Reed case, some of those motion hearings that we listened to prior to trial were just so very interesting for people and educational. So it'll be interesting. You and I will, once we hear the evidence coming in as far as this case goes, plus the motion hearing on when the defense tries to get the lyrics and the videos out. That will be
Yes.
interesting to talk about. I think that in this day and age, the true crimers out there, they really like to be educated on the law, which excites me since I used to be a professor at BC. So I
It
taught
does,
for many years.
and Margaret, I love an educated public. I
Me too.
want them to see how we do what we do, the lack of sleep, the amount of stress on the attorneys, but that the system can be fair and it can be very unfair. But to put
Mhm.
a translucent lens, I think is imperative. We should be sharing what exactly all of this terminology is and make the courtroom a place that people feel like they can watch and learn. And an educated public is the best public that we could want. So I've always been a supporter of it. I'm hoping it will be allowed, but we'll
Yeah,
see.
me too. Me too. And it's great to have educated juries too. And I think cases like this, cases like Karen Reed, it holds the police accountable too. They know there's cameras out there, and they know that now that a judge can go through their personal cell phones and it can come out like Proctor, right? Oh,
Everything.
wow.
Everything,
Yeah.
everything the client says or does, every
Mhm.
Google search, every WhatsApp,
Yeah.
everything is discoverable. And for the officers, every derogatory term they use for a woman or a
Yes.
minority, it needs to be out in the open
I
because only
agree.
that way do we change policy and we
Mhm.
hold them accountable. And there's nothing better than holding an officer accountable by saying you can't treat people like that and then
Right.
expect the results that you want. You can't do that.
I completely agree. And, did you follow the Brian Walsh case at all here in Massachusetts? Where,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay, me too. Um, and it's similar to this case in that Brian Walsh, who has been convicted now for murdering his wife, the
Yeah.
beautiful Anna, he Googled all the Google searches really killed him. Um, Gosh, how to dismember a body, went on and on and on, and how to get rid of a body, and all. I think he got lucky in that he put her remains in trash bags. Those trash bags were taken to dumpsters not too far from where I live, and they went to the Cape where they were incinerated. So I think he got lucky there. By the way, that the whole thing, they I can't quite walk, but I could bike to their house. That's how close it was. It's just eerie, that this could happen.
It's crazy to me that people don't think that but it's crazy to me because I'm in it every day.
Yeah,
Everything we do on the computer is discoverable.
I know.
Teenagers have to understand posting pictures on social media with stolen property. That's all the police need, and they can access social media by a snap. Cell
Right.
phones, it's a simple warrant.
I know it.
Everything we do everything on ChatGPT is discoverable. There's nothing
Yeah,
that these guys can't find. So the
right.
Brian Walsh case I loved it because it showed how much a Google search can really tell the jury, oh, this guy did it. In other words, jurors really take search engines very seriously.
Oh, yeah.
And we see it in everything, how long does it take for the poison to work?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no kidding. And
Yeah.
by the way, a quick defense question for you on the Brian Walsh case. Remember when the defense attorney in his opening statement, he said, "Oh, you'll be hearing from my client. My client's Brian's story is this, that
Yeah.
he went upstairs and she was dead in her bed and he pushed, oh no, and then he panicked and chopped her up. But then he decided not to take the stand. I almost think he would have been better off in a judge trial only without the jury and taking the stand. What's your thought?
It's hard to
Hindsight is
hindsight, right?
2020.
It's
Yeah.
hard because a lot of times when we start trial, our client who they have the right to remain silent in trial or
Mm-hmm.
speak or testify, they will say, Silva, I'm absolutely going to testify. Okay, that's your right. Absolutely, we'll have you on. But there are many reasons why the client will change their mind. The prosecutor maybe is so skilled as a cross-examiner, they get nervous. Even if they're absolutely innocent, they're like, I don't think I can do this. Or they think that the prosecutors didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Or they think that, they're going to win the case no matter what. There's an arrogance that comes out there. In this case, I think you're right. I wonder if he actually felt comfortable to testify without a jury in front of a judge. Would his lot be different? But I will tell you, more times than not, judges believe that honestly, it's really hard for me to say this, but I feel like sometimes I really do have to prove my client innocent in front of a judge
Okay.
because they think majority of the clients, from what they see every day with the plea deals, with juries do convict. 98% of federal trials are won by prosecutors. That has a subliminal effect on judges' minds, where I think they gravitate towards, when there are bench trials, more so guilty, which is why we prefer jury trials. We can hang by just one juror saying not
True.
guilty. So the proportions are in our favor with the juror trial. But I think it's a great point, Margaret. I think if maybe they had an opportunity to just argue with the judge, have the defendant testify in front of the judge. It was funny too because he was so loquacious. He was always talking to his defense counsel. I
Yeah.
was shocked he didn't take the stand.
Me too. Me too. We all were here in
Yeah,
Massachusetts. I was in that courtroom too. It was like, oh my God. Couldn't
it
believe it.
was. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
shocking.
So,
And we, yeah.
yeah. And then another thing I keep thinking, so I'm also a writer. And I write thrillers and things like that. But as I listen to more of these true crime cases and the Google searches, and I keep thinking, wow, it must be in all the cameras everywhere. It must be very hard to get away with M, right? And how do you get rid of a body? And then, right, I feel like it's just at this day and age. But then look at Nancy Guthrie. What's your thought on that? And I don't mean to keep you all night, but I had to ask.
Margaret, every single day I was on the internet with the first thing I searched was, did they find Nancy Guthrie? In this day and age, there are still so many missing people that don't have this national attention on them, missing faces, missing bodies that we've just never found. So it's this dichotomy, right? Where everything we do has a history that can be found, but yet we have unspeakable amounts of people who are missing. And the highest profile case of Nancy Guthrie, I am in shock. I do think in that case, though, I do think the police had made mistakes early on. I don't think they did a proper sweep of her property. I believe that they thought maybe she would turn up. I do think it was riddled with a small town police mentality where there aren't a lot of major crimes, where they had timing missed opportunities, because timing in missing person cases is the number one factor in finding people alive. And they lost that from the beginning. And there were just some weird aspects to the case that still bother me. This type of massive attention and the amount of mistakes, and the reward money was obnoxiously low for any information on the case. There was no incentive for someone to come forward for the first few months. Just shocking details that you just wonder what happened to this poor woman.
I know. And, I know there's a lot of missing people out there, but on the flip side, how often do we see an actual kidnapping,
It's
right?
true.
Like
Where
that.
the person is not uncovered for months. A person who is so high profile with one of the most beloved talents in the United States, it is shocking. I
Yeah.
don't. I think the irony, Margaret, is going to be, will she be found within feet of her residence? I don't know.
I've had Jen Coffindaffer on the
Yes,
here, and it's interesting. Jen and I
she's
also,
fantastic. Yeah.
oh, I love her. And we actually followed the Karen Reed trial together. She has been following this case, and she's so smart. Now, she thinks that it was not, like, she does not think it was a burglary gone bad. She thinks it was planned. And she also feels that it's Nancy's body is not in Mexico, but somewhere not too far from her house, because I guess that whole area, the desert area there's many, many bodies buried in that area.
I can't disagree with her. That's why I still think she might be feet within her residence. I just don't think that proper resources were used from the first minute.
Yeah.
And I think that is the death knell of missing persons cases. The resources, the time, the attention, the reward money. People, unfortunately, are incentivized with monetary bonuses for information. It
Oh,
makes
yeah.
them want to look. We miss that opportunity. Again, you pray and hope that maybe they'll find. But it teaches us all when, we also saw this with Celeste's case as well, with David's case. Celeste was missing for a long time. Proper resources weren't given to this 11-year-old missing girl. We knew that she was groomed. The parents knew that there was this relationship, though I think they really believed the relationship was over. But again, we need resources, and we need police officers who are staffed. We have understaffed officers. We need all of those resources when it comes to investigations. And as you said, Margaret, brilliantly, hindsight is 2020.
Yeah.
That is also an issue that we deal with, where we wish we can turn back time, but time is of the essence when it actually is a missing person.
Right. Right. Well said. Well, Silva, thank you so much for being on the show. We have to do this again, because I think we have a nice dynamic going here.
You are brilliant, and you are
Oh.
amazing, Margaret. It would be an honor anytime. And we will be following this case beyond words.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let's do it again. And I'm happy to, we can do more shows together. It's
Absolutely.
a lot of fun, and good luck with all your hard work out there. You've accomplished a lot, and I'm very lucky to have you on. So I really
thank you so
appreciate
much for the time, Margaret. You are brilliant, and it's been an honor. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, well, enjoy your evening out in LA, and
Thank you.
I will talk to you soon. So I'm going to end the stream and then say goodbye.
Okay.
And again, thank you everyone for tuning in to the Margaret McLean Show. Don't forget to press the subscribe button, and I'll be following this case plus others. There's a lot going on. Look at Murdoch is going to be tried again. So a lot going on. And I wish everybody a good night.